The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Henry Cole was cataloging data in the Imperial Archives when he found something interesting. The Zelthoran Empire had conquered 47 star systems over the past 1,000 years. But in all that time, they had never faced real resistance. Species either surrendered immediately or were wiped out. None had ever fought back successfully. Henry shared this information through the network. It spread quickly, passed along in whispered conversations and coded messages. The Zelthorans had never adapted because they had never needed to. Their technology was superior, their tactics overwhelming, but those tactics had not changed in centuries. Kate gathered her team of engineers in an abandoned maintenance tunnel beneath the Denver facility. There were 15 of them, working by the light of stolen glow sticks. They huddled around pieces of Zelthoran equipment, studying every circuit and power cell. Their shields work on a rotating frequency, Kate explained, her fingers tracing the components. But the rotation follows a set pattern. If we can predict the pattern, we can time an attack to hit when the shields are weakest. One of the other engineers, a young woman named Amy, shook her head. Even at the weakest point, their shields are stronger than anything we have. Kate smiled. It was the first real smile she had worn in months. Not if we use their own power against them. I have been working on something. She pulled out a device she had built from salvaged parts. It looked crude, assembled from wire and metal scraps. But when she activated it, the lights in the tunnel flickered. An electromagnetic pulse, Kate said. Strong enough to disrupt their systems for a few seconds. Not destroy them, just confuse them. In those seconds, conventional weapons can get through. The information traveled through the resistance network. Jack received it 3 days later, passed along by a worker who pretended to stumble and bump into him. The message was simple. They had a weapon that could work. Jack called a meeting of the resistance leaders. They gathered in an old subway station, long abandoned and forgotten. There were 20 people in total, representatives from different cells across Earth and the colonies. They sat on broken benches and rubble, their faces lit by chemical lights. We need a target, Jack said. Something that will prove we can fight back. Something that will inspire others. Danny Carter spoke up. He had traveled from the moon for this meeting, risking everything to be here. The mining colony on Titan. Small garrison, only 50 guards. But it has weapons and ships. If we take it, we have resources. Lisa Hayes nodded. I can get explosives. Nothing fancy, but enough to damage their equipment. How many people can we get there? Someone asked. Danny thought for a moment. I can modify a transport ship. Make it look like it is having engine trouble. They will let us dock for repairs. I can fit 30 people if we pack tight. The plan came together over the next hour. It was risky, built on hope and desperation more than solid strategy. But it was a chance, and chances were all they had. 2 weeks later, Danny piloted a transport ship toward Titan. In the cargo hold, 30 resistance fighters sat in darkness. Jack was among them, wearing a worker's uniform that smelled like oil and sweat. Kate was there too, carrying her makeshift pulse device. Lisa had packed every weapon she could smuggle, mostly improvised explosives and a handful of stolen Zelthoran pistols. The transport ship shook as it entered Titan's atmosphere. Danny kept the flight path erratic, making it look like the engines were failing. The Zelthoran control tower ordered him to land at the repair facility. This is it, Danny said over the internal communication system. Docking in 2 minutes. The ship touched down with a thud. The cargo door opened and repair crews approached. They expected to find a damaged ship and tired workers. Instead, they found 30 humans with weapons. The fight was brutal and quick. The Zelthorans reached for their guns, but Kate activated the pulse device. The electromagnetic wave spread across the landing area, and for 3 seconds every Zelthoran weapon and shield stopped working. In those 3 seconds, the humans attacked. Jack fired a stolen pistol, dropping 1 guard. Lisa threw an explosive that tore through a group of Zelthorans near the control building. The humans spread out, moving fast using cover, fighting with a desperation their enemies had never encountered. The Zelthorans tried to respond. They fell back to defensive positions, calling for reinforcements. But the humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors, using every dirty trick and desperate tactic they knew. They climbed walls, attacked from unexpected angles, and showed no mercy. 20 minutes after the first shot was fired, the landing area was secure. The humans had lost 8 people, but the Zelthoran garrison was in chaos. Jack led a team into the control building while Danny secured the ships. Inside the control center, Zelthoran officers tried to send distress signals. Lisa threw a flash grenade and the humans rushed in. The fight was over in seconds. Jack stood over the body of the garrison commander, breathing hard, his hands shaking. "Get those signals shut down," he ordered. "We need time." Kate worked at the control panel, her fingers flying over alien keys. She had studied this equipment for months, memorized every function. The distress signal stopped. The base went silent. For the first time in 3 years, humans controlled Zelthoran territory. News of the victory spread faster than anyone expected. The Resistance had prepared for this, setting up communication networks that used Zelthoran channels against them. Coded messages went out to Earth, Mars, and the Moon. Simple phrases that meant everything to those who heard them. "The sky is clear on Titan." Within days, other cells began acting. On Mars, workers sabotaged a fuel depot, causing an explosion that destroyed 3 Zelthoran ships. On Earth, Resistance fighters ambushed a supply convoy, stealing weapons and vehicles. The attacks were small, barely noticeable in the grand scale of the Empire, but they were happening. The Zelthorans responded with force. They executed workers suspected of rebellion. They increased patrols and security measures. But they did not understand what they were facing. They thought this was like other rebellions, a brief surge of violence that would burn itself out. They were wrong. Jack set up a command center in the captured Titan facility. The space was cramped and cold, but it was theirs. Maps covered the walls, showing Zelthoran positions across the solar system. Reports came in daily from Resistance cells, information about guard rotations, weapon depots, and weak points in the occupation. Kate worked on improving their weapons. The pulse device had worked better than expected, but it needed refinement. She built 3 more, each one more powerful than the last. Other engineers joined her, bringing ideas and skills. They started modifying captured Zelthoran weapons, making them easier for humans to use. Danny trained new pilots. They practiced in simulators, learning to fly Zelthoran ships. The controls were different from human designs, but not impossible to master. Danny taught them his style of flying, erratic and unpredictable, using maneuvers that confused automated defense systems. Lisa organized the combat training. She had 30 soldiers now, former military personnel who had been scattered across work camps. They drilled constantly, practicing the close-quarters combat that had won the Titan facility. They learned to move fast, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy could respond. Henry continued his intelligence work from Earth. He sent reports about Zelthoran fleet movements, supply lines, and command structures. His information became crucial, allowing the Resistance to predict where the Empire would strike next. 3 months after the Titan victory, Jack planned the next operation. This one was bigger, riskier. They would hit a supply depot on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The depot supplied 6 different Zelthoran garrisons. If they destroyed it, those garrisons would be weakened. 50 Resistance fighters gathered for the mission. They launched from Titan in 3 captured ships, flying in formation like they belonged there. The Zelthoran patrols saw them coming but did not react. The ships had proper identification codes stolen from the Titan facility. The attack began at dawn. The humans came in fast, using the pulse devices to disable the depot's defenses. Explosives tore through storage facilities, destroying fuel and ammunition. Zelthoran guards rushed to respond, but the humans were already everywhere, fighting from cover using tactics the Empire had never encountered. The battle lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, the depot was destroyed, and the humans had captured enough weapons and supplies to arm another 100 fighters. They lost 12 people, but the mission was a success. Word of the Europa raid spread across the Resistance network. More people joined the fight. Workers who had been too afraid to act found their courage. Scientists and engineers who had cooperated with the Zelthorans began feeding information to the Resistance. The Empire noticed. They could no longer ignore what was happening. The humans were not just surviving, they were fighting back. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Zelthoran Empire faced an enemy that refused to quit. The news reached Earth 6 months after Titan fell to the Resistance. The Zelthoran Empire was sending a warlord named Krath to crush the human rebellion. His reputation preceded him like a shadow. He had destroyed rebellions on 12 different worlds, each time using maximum brutality to ensure no one would dare resist again. Jack received the intelligence from Henry, who had intercepted Imperial communications. Krath was coming with 3 full battle fleets, more firepower than the entire resistance had faced combined. His orders were simple: end the rebellion by any means necessary. He will target civilians, Henry's message warned. Krath does not care about military targets. He destroys cities until the rebels surrender. The resistance leaders met in the Titan facility. The mood was grim. They had won small victories, but this was different. This was the full weight of the Empire coming down on them. We need to evacuate the colonies, someone suggested. Get people away from population centers. Jack shook his head. There is nowhere to run. If we scatter, he will hunt us down one by one. We need to face him. With what? Lisa asked. We have 3 capital ships and maybe 200 fighters. He has 3 fleets. Kate had been quiet during the discussion, but now she spoke up. We do not need to beat him in a straight fight. We need to take away his advantage. Everyone looked at her. Krath commands from a flagship, Kate explained. A ship called Dominion's Fist. If we can capture it, we can turn his own weapons against his fleet. The room erupted in arguments. The idea was insane. Boarding a Zelthoran flagship was suicide. But as the discussion continued, Jack began to see the possibility. It was desperate, but everything they had done was desperate. How would we even get close? Danny asked. Kate smiled. We use one of our captured ships. We broadcast a distress signal. Say we are a Zelthoran transport under attack by rebels. They will let us dock to provide support. Lisa nodded slowly. Once we are inside, we fight our way to the bridge. Take control of the ship's weapons. We would need a team of 20 at least, Jack said, and most of them would not survive. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. This was a one-way mission for whoever went. I will lead it, Jack said. I am coming with you, Danny added immediately. Kate raised her hand. I need to be there to access their systems. Lisa stood up. Someone has to handle the weapons. That is me, others volunteered. In the end, 25 people formed the assault team. They were soldiers, engineers, and pilots. They were the best the resistance had, and they all knew they were probably going to die. They had 72 hours to prepare. Krath's fleet would arrive at Earth in 3 days, and New Seattle was his first target. 2 million people lived in that city. If the assault team failed, those people would die. The team trained constantly, running through simulations of the ship layout. They memorized every corridor, every access point, every potential choke point. Kate built more pulse devices, small ones that could disable security systems and door locks. Lisa prepared weapons, mostly captured Zelthoran guns and improvised explosives. The captured transport ship they would use was prepared. Danny modified the engines to give them more speed, just in case they needed to run. The crew painted fake damage on the hull and prepared the distress beacon. On the final night before launch, Jack walked through the Titan facility. He saw resistance fighters preparing for battle, checking weapons and equipment. These people had been workers and miners 3 years ago. Now they were soldiers ready to fight an empire. He found Kate in the engineering section, making final adjustments to her pulse devices. Do you think this will work? She asked without looking up. Jack thought about lying, but Kate deserved the truth. I do not know. But it is our only chance, Kate nodded. That is what I thought. The assault team gathered in the transport ship at dawn. They wore stolen Zelthoran uniforms, hoping it would buy them a few extra seconds once they were aboard the flagship. Each person carried minimal equipment, just weapons and the tools they would need. Danny took the pilot seat. His hands were steady as he ran through the pre-flight checks. Everyone ready? A chorus of affirmatives came back. The transport launched from Titan, accelerating toward Earth. It would take 8 hours to reach the planet. 8 hours to think about what they were about to do. Krath's fleet arrived right on schedule. 3 battle groups, each containing dozens of ships, emerged from faster-than-light travel. The flagship Dominion's Fist was at the center, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Danny activated the distress beacon. This is Transport Vessel Harvest 7. We are under attack by human rebels, requesting immediate assistance. The response came quickly. Harvest 7, this is Dominion's Fist. We read your distress. Come to Docking Bay 3. We will provide support. The transport approached the flagship, flying erratically like a damaged ship would. Zelthoran fighters circled them but did not fire. They saw a friendly vessel in trouble, exactly what the team wanted them to see. The docking bay doors opened and Danny guided the ship inside. Through the viewports they could see Zelthoran soldiers waiting, ready to help repair the ship and deal with the reported rebel attack. "Here we go," Jack said. He checked his weapon one last time. "Remember the plan? Fast and hard. Do not stop moving. The transport touched down." The cargo door opened. The Zelthoran soldiers outside never had a chance to react. Kate activated her pulse device and the bay's security systems went dark. The assault team poured out, weapons firing. The humans had surprise and desperation on their side. The fight through the ship was brutal. The Zelthorans tried to seal corridors and trap the humans, but Kate kept the systems confused, opening doors and disabling weapons. The team moved fast, following the planned route, leaving bodies behind them. They lost 3 people in the first 5 minutes. A Zelthoran counterattack caught them in a narrow corridor, and heavy weapons cut through the team. Jack pulled the survivors forward, knowing that stopping meant death. The ship's alarms were screaming now. Krath knew his flagship was under attack. Reinforcements were coming from every direction. The humans had minutes at best. They reached a junction point. Lisa threw explosives down one corridor, blocking it with debris. The team turned down another path, racing toward the bridge. Henry's intelligence had been accurate. The bridge was 3 levels up, accessible through a central lift. But the lift was heavily guarded. 10 Zelthoran soldiers in full armor stood between the humans and their goal. "Pulse device won't work on their armor," Kate shouted over the gunfire. "Too much shielding." Jack made a decision. "Lisa, Danny, take 6 people and find another route. The rest of us will keep them busy here." It was a death sentence for the group staying behind, and everyone knew it. But Danny nodded and took his team, disappearing down a side corridor. Jack and the remaining fighters opened fire on the guards, drawing their attention. The fight was desperate. The Zelthoran soldiers were well-trained and heavily armored. Jack watched 3 more humans fall, their weapons barely scratching the enemy armor. But they were buying time, and time was all that mattered. Danny's team found a maintenance shaft that led to the bridge level. They climbed through cramped spaces, pulling themselves up using pipes and cables. Lisa's hands were bleeding by the time they reached the top, but she did not slow down. They emerged in a corridor right behind the bridge. 2 guards stood at the door, their backs to the maintenance shaft. Lisa shot them both before they could turn around. Kate worked on the door lock while the rest of the team provided cover. Her pulse device was running low on power, but it had enough for one more use. The door opened. The bridge was chaos. Zelthoran officers were shouting orders, trying to coordinate the defense of the ship. Warlord Krath stood at the center, a massive figure in dark armor. He turned as the humans burst in, his face showing shock for just a moment. Then the fighting began. It lasted less than a minute, but it felt like hours. Danny shot 2 officers before they could draw weapons. Lisa threw an explosive that took out a control station and 3 more Zelthorans. Kate dove for cover and started working on the weapons control panel. Krath drew a massive sword and charged at Danny. The warlord was fast despite his size, the sword cutting through the air with deadly precision. Danny rolled under the strike and fired his pistol at point-blank range. The shots hit Krath's armor and did nothing. Jack burst onto the bridge through the main door, the last survivor of his group. He saw Krath attacking Danny and did not hesitate. He jumped on the warlord's back, his combat knife finding a gap in the armor near the neck. Krath roared and threw Jack across the bridge, but the damage was done. Purple blood poured from the wound. Kate's fingers flew across the control panel. The systems were similar to what she had studied, but more complex. She heard fighting behind her, heard Danny shouting, heard the sound of weapons fire. She blocked it all out and focused on the task. There, the weapons control. She accessed the targeting systems and turned them on Krath's own fleet. "Firing," she said quietly. Dominion's fist opened fire on the other ships in the fleet. The Zelthoran vessels had their shields down, preparing to bombard Earth. They never expected to be attacked by their own flagship. The heavy weapons tore through them like paper. On the bridge, Krath fell to his knees. The sky turned dark at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. Jack Morrison looked up from his station aboard Terra Prime and felt his blood turn cold. Ships were appearing above Earth, massive vessels that made humanity's largest carriers look like toys. There were hundreds of them appearing in perfect formation, blocking out the sun. Jack had been a commander in the Earth Defense Force for 12 years. He had trained for alien contact, prepared for first encounters, studied every protocol. Nothing had prepared him for this. His hands moved across the control panel trying to raise the alarm, but the communications were already dead. Every satellite, every relay, every connection went silent in seconds. The alien ships did not fire immediately. They did not need to. Within the first hour, every weapon platform humanity had built was disabled. Missile systems went offline, defense stations lost power, nuclear arsenals became useless metal. The aliens had technology that humanity could not comprehend, and they used it without mercy. Jack watched the display screens as the invasion unfolded. The aliens landed in every major city on Earth: New York, London, Beijing, Mumbai, São Paulo. Their ships descended like falling mountains, crushing buildings beneath them. Ground forces poured out, tall figures in dark armor that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with purpose, sweeping through streets, rounding up anyone who resisted. The broadcast came 3 hours after the first ship appeared. A voice spoke in perfect English and every language on Earth simultaneously. The translation technology was flawless. You are now subjects of the Zelthoran Empire. Resistance is futile. Cooperation will be rewarded. Defiance will be punished. You will work. You will serve. You will live if you obey, that was all. No negotiation. No explanation. Just a simple statement of fact. Jack tried to organize a response from Terra Prime, but there was nothing to organize. Half his crew was dead, killed when the aliens disabled the station's life support systems for exactly 30 seconds. It had been a demonstration, a warning. The survivors understood the message clearly. On Earth below, the occupation began immediately. The Zelthorans established administrative centers in the remains of government buildings. Human leaders were given a choice: serve the Empire or die. Most chose to serve. Those who refused were executed publicly, their bodies left in the streets as warnings. The days turned into weeks. The weeks became months. Humanity learned what it meant to be conquered. Jack was eventually brought down to Earth. Terra Prime was stripped of anything useful and left as a dead shell in orbit. He was assigned to a work crew in what used to be Denver. The city was now a processing center, where humans sorted materials taken from asteroid mines. The work was endless. Humans labored 18 hours a day, given just enough food and water to survive. The Zelthorans watched everything with cold efficiency. They did not hate humans. They did not even seem to consider them worth hating. Humans were tools, nothing more. Tools to be used until they broke. Jack met Kate Williams in the sorting facility. She had been an engineer before the invasion, one of the brightest minds at the Aerospace Development Center. Now she moved scrap metal from one pile to another, her hands covered in cuts and burns. They did not dare speak during work hours. The Zelthorans had sensors everywhere, devices that could detect raised voices, unusual movements, anything that might indicate resistance. But during the brief rest periods when the workers were herded into sleeping areas, whispers began to spread. Kate had noticed something. The Zelthoran guards followed exact patterns. They walked the same routes at the same times. Their responses to situations were predictable, almost mechanical. When a worker collapsed from exhaustion, the guards responded the same way every time. When equipment malfunctioned, they followed the same repair procedures without variation. They do not think, Kate whispered to Jack one night, her voice barely audible. They just follow programming. Like machines, Jack listened carefully. Around them, hundreds of other workers pretended to sleep. Some actually slept, too exhausted to stay conscious. Others listened to the whispered conversations, hungry for any information, any hope. I worked on their equipment today, Kate continued. Fixed one of their transport units. The technology is advanced, but it is old, really old. They have not changed anything in centuries, maybe longer. This information spread through the sleeping area like fire. Humans began to watch their captors more carefully. They studied the patterns, the behaviors, the technology. The Zelthorans noticed nothing. Why would they? Humans were primitive creatures, barely capable of following simple instructions. 3 years passed. 3 years of slavery, of watching friends and family die from exhaustion or punishment. 3 years of eating processed nutrients that tasted like cardboard. 3 years of sleeping on cold floors and waking to darkness. But during those 3 years, something changed. Humans began to organize. Not openly, never openly, but in whispers and glances. In small acts of sabotage that looked like accidents. In information shared through carefully coded words, Jack found himself at the center of a growing network. Former soldiers found each other, recognized each other through subtle signs. They began training in secret, practicing combat moves during work shifts, disguising their exercises as normal labor. Kate gathered other engineers and scientists. They studied every piece of Zelthoron technology they could access. They memorized the patterns of guard rotations. They mapped the locations of weapons depots and power stations. Danny Carter was a pilot before the invasion. He had flown experimental aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base. Now he operated mining equipment on the moon, drilling into rock to extract rare minerals for the Empire. But Danny had access to spacecraft, even if they were just simple transport vessels. He began making friends with other pilots, building a network that stretched across human colonies in the solar system. Lisa Hayes had been a weapons specialist in the Marine Corps. The Zelthorans put her to work in a manufacturing facility, building components for their ships. She did not understand what most of the components did, but she learned. She memorized every specification, every tolerance, every weakness in the designs. Henry Cole was a professor of military history before the invasion. The Zelthorans considered him useless for physical labor and assigned him to data entry, cataloging human records for Imperial archives. This gave him access to communication networks. He could not send messages, but he could see them. He learned the Zelthoran command structure, identified important targets, and found ways to share this information. The network grew slowly, carefully. One person recruited another. Trust was built through shared suffering and small acts of courage. Plans began to form, rough and desperate, but plans nonetheless. On the colony on Titan, a group of workers managed to smuggle weapons from a crashed Zelthoran ship. On Mars, engineers disabled security systems for exactly 12 seconds, proving it could be done. On Earth, soldiers trained in abandoned subway tunnels learning to fight again. The Zelthorans noticed none of this. They saw only obedient workers, broken and defeated. They saw a conquered species that had accepted its fate. They were wrong. Jack stood in the sorting facility one evening, watching the sunset through the broken windows. The sky was red and angry, filled with dust from the industrial processes the Zelthorans had established. Kate stood beside him, her face hard and determined. "Soon," she said quietly. "We will be ready soon." Jack nodded. Around them, hundreds of humans continued their work, moving materials, operating machines, following orders. But now there was something different in their eyes. Something the Zelthorans had not seen before and would not recognize if they did. It was hope. And hope, as the Empire would soon learn, was the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. The battle in orbit lasted 4 hours. Dominion's fist continued firing on the Zelthoran fleet, targeting command ships and carriers first. Kate learned the weapon systems quickly, her engineering mind adapting to the alien controls. Every shot counted, every hit weakening the enemy forces that had come to destroy Earth. The other Zelthoran ships tried to fight back, but their shields were calibrated against external threats, not weapons from their own flagship. They scrambled to adjust to understand what was happening, but confusion and panic spread through their ranks. From Earth's surface, resistance fighters watched the battle through captured surveillance equipment. They saw the massive ship that should have been their doom instead tearing through the enemy fleet. Word spread quickly. Hope, which had seemed foolish just hours before, suddenly felt real. Jack stood on the bridge of the captured flagship, still processing what they had accomplished. Around him, the 7 survivors of the assault team worked to secure the ship. Danny guarded the entrance with a captured rifle. Lisa checked on wounded team members. Kate remained at the weapons station, her face intense with concentration. 3 carriers destroyed, Kate reported. 2 more badly damaged. They are trying to retreat. Do not let them, Jack ordered. If even one ship escapes, they will bring reinforcements. The battle turned into a hunt. The Zelthoran ships that remained tried to flee, but Dominion's fist was faster and more powerful. One by one, they were destroyed or forced to surrender. When it ended, 60% of Krath's fleet was gone. The rest had surrendered or been captured by resistance fighters who swarmed the disabled ships. Earth had survived. More than survived, they had won. The victory changed everything. Within days, resistance cells across the solar system launched coordinated attacks. They had been holding back, waiting for a sign that victory was possible. The destruction of Krath's fleet was that sign. On Mars, workers seized control of the main colony dome. The Zelthoran garrison tried to retake it, but human fighters held them off using captured weapons and knowledge gained from studying enemy tactics. After 3 days of fighting, the Zelthorans retreated to their ships. On the moon, Danny's network of pilots stole 6 transport ships and used them to evacuate prisoners from work camps. They flew to hidden bases in the asteroid belt, bases that had been prepared months ago for this moment. On Earth, the resistance came out of the shadows. They attacked occupation centers, freed prisoner camps, and began reclaiming cities. The Zelthorans still had superior numbers and technology, but their confidence was shaken. For the first time, they were afraid. Jack was promoted to admiral by unanimous agreement of the resistance leadership. He did not want the title, but someone had to coordinate the growing military force. Humanity was no longer just resisting. They were building an actual fleet. The captured ships from Krath's fleet became the foundation. Kate led teams of engineers who worked day and night to understand the technology. They could not build Zelthoran ships from scratch, but they could repair and modify the ones they had taken. More importantly, Kate began combining human innovation with alien technology. She took the pulse devices that had proven so effective and scaled them up, mounting them on small human-built fighters. She redesigned the weapon systems to be more adaptable, allowing for changes during combat instead of following rigid patterns. The Zelthorans never innovate, she explained to her engineering team. They use what works and never change it. We can be different. We can adapt. Lisa took charge of training new soldiers. The resistance was growing daily as more people found the courage to fight. Former workers and miners became fighters. Scientists and teachers learned to use weapons. Every person who joined was another piece of humanity's growing strength. The training was intense. Lisa taught them not just how to shoot, but how to think like guerrilla fighters. How to use terrain and surprise. How to fight enemies with better equipment by being smarter and faster. Henry coordinated intelligence gathering across dozens of worlds. The Zelthoran Empire was vast, and their communications network was massive. By tapping into that network, Henry could track ship movements, monitor supply lines, and identify weaknesses. He discovered something crucial. The Empire was starting to fracture. The defeat at Earth had shocked the other conquered species. If humans could fight back successfully, maybe they could too. Rebellions were starting on other worlds, small at first but growing. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the Zelthoran Empire struck back. They sent another fleet larger than Krath's, commanded by an admiral named Vorik. This time they knew what they were facing. This time they were prepared. The Battle of the Orbital Ring would become the bloodiest engagement in human history. Vorik's fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system and moved slowly inward, taking time to scan for traps and ambushes. They had learned from Krath's defeat. They would not be caught by surprise. Jack watched the enemy approach from the bridge of Dominion's Fist, now renamed Terra Ascendant. Around him, the Earth Defense Fleet waited. It was a grand name for a collection of captured alien ships and retrofitted human vessels, but it was all they had. The fleet counted 43 ships total. Vorik had twice that number, and his ships were newer, better maintained. On paper, it was not even a contest. "Deploy the fighters," Jack ordered. "All squadrons follow the plan." Hundreds of small craft launched from carriers and stations. These were human-built ships, fast and agile, armed with Kate's improved pulse weapons. They flew in patterns that defied Zelthoran tactical doctrine, weaving and spinning in ways that confused the enemy's targeting systems. The battle began at maximum range. Vorik's ships opened fire with their long-range cannons, massive weapons that could destroy a ship with a single hit. The human fleet scattered, using speed and unpredictable movements to avoid the shots. Then the fighters struck. They came in from multiple angles, hitting the Zelthoran ships from blind spots the aliens did not even know they had. Pulse weapons disabled shields for crucial seconds, allowing torpedoes to get through. But the Zelthorans adapted. Vorik had studied the Battle of Earth. He knew about the pulse weapons now. His ships had been upgraded with better shielding, systems that could recover faster from electromagnetic disruption. The human fighters took heavy losses. Jack watched on the tactical display as ship after ship went dark. Good pilots, brave people dying because they were outmatched. "We need to close the distance," Danny said. He was now the commander of the fighter wings, coordinating the attack. Our weapons work better up close. If we close, their main guns will tear us apart, someone argued. Jack made the call. All ships full speed ahead. Close to engagement range, it was a desperate gamble. The human ships accelerated, racing toward the enemy fleet. Zelthoran guns tracked them, firing constantly. 3 human ships exploded before they covered half the distance. 2 more took critical hits and fell behind, venting atmosphere, but the rest made it. At close range, the battle became chaos. Human ships were smaller and faster. They weaved between the larger Zelthoran vessels, firing at weak points, targeting engines and weapon systems. The Zelthorans tried to respond, but their ships were built for long-range engagement. In close quarters, their size became a liability. Kate had planned for this. The human weapons, while weaker than Zelthoran guns, had faster firing rates. They could hit the same spot multiple times in seconds, wearing down shields through persistence rather than raw power. The battle raged for hours. Ships burned and died on both sides. Jack watched the tactical display as the fleet he had built was slowly destroyed. But they were taking the enemy with them. A Zelthoran dreadnought destroyed the carrier Freedom's Light with a direct hit to the reactor. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star in the sky. But as the dreadnought turned to target another ship, a damaged human frigate rammed it at full speed. The frigate's captain, a woman named Sarah who had been a schoolteacher before the war, had made the choice when her engines failed. Rather than die helplessly, she aimed her ship at the enemy and pushed the throttle to maximum. The impact created a massive explosion that tore the dreadnought in half. Acts like that happened dozens of times during the battle. Damaged ships became weapons. Crews that knew they were dying took enemies with them. The Zelthorans had superior technology, but the humans had something else. They had the desperate courage of people fighting for their survival. Vorik realized his mistake too late. He had expected a conventional battle, ships trading fire at long range until one side retreated. Instead, he got a brawl, humans clawing and fighting for every meter of space. His fleet started taking critical losses. The ships that remained were damaged, their shields weakened by constant pulse weapons fire. When the human fleet finally broke through to the flagship, Vorik tried to retreat. Jack gave the order. All ships target the flagship. Do not let it escape. Terra Ascendant led the charge. Its heavy weapons, combined with fire from a dozen other ships, overwhelmed the flagship's shields. The Zelthoran command ship tried to turn and run, but human fighters swarmed it, targeting engines and weapons. The flagship went dead in space, power failing across its systems. Vorik sent a surrender signal. The battle ended 3 days after it began. 2 years passed after the Battle of the Orbital Ring, 2 years of constant warfare across the galaxy. The Zelthoran Empire, which had stood for 1,000 years, was crumbling. The rebellion started slowly. A mining colony here, a farming world there. Species that had been conquered decades or centuries ago found their courage. They watched humans fight impossible battles and win, and they decided to fight too. The Empire tried to respond, sending fleets to crush each rebellion. But there were too many fires burning. While they fought humans in the Sol system, the Kryn rebelled in the Outer Reach. While they bombed Kryn cities, the Talvari rose up in the core sectors. The Empire's military, once seemingly infinite, was stretched too thin. Jack stood in the command center on Earth, now rebuilt as the headquarters of what they called the Free Worlds Alliance. Representatives from 6 different species worked alongside humans, coordinating attacks and sharing intelligence. The walls were covered with star maps, showing rebel-controlled territory in green and Empire holdings in red. A year ago, the map was almost entirely red. Now patches of green appeared everywhere, growing larger each day. The Dorvan system just declared independence, Henry reported. He looked older now, the stress of coordinating intelligence across multiple star systems showing in gray hair and tired eyes. That is 3 systems this week. Kate entered the command center carrying a datapad. She barely slept anymore, spending every waking hour working on new weapons and ship designs. The new fighters are ready. We can produce 200 per month now. The Earth Defense Fleet had grown into a real military force. Captured Zelthoran ships formed the backbone, but human engineers had been building their own vessels. They were smaller than alien ships, less powerful, but faster and more adaptable. More importantly, they could be built quickly using resources from the asteroid belt. Lisa had trained thousands of soldiers now, The training centers on Earth, Mars, and the Moon operated constantly, turning civilians into fighters. She had also begun training soldiers from other species, teaching them human tactics and strategies. The Zelthorans are pulling back from the frontier sectors, Lisa reported during the daily briefing. They are consolidating their forces around the core worlds. Jack studied the star map. The Empire was retreating, abandoning conquered territory to defend their most important systems. It was a strategic withdrawal, but it was also a sign of weakness. They know they cannot hold everything, Jack said, so they will try to hold what matters most. Danny spoke up from his position at the communications station. We have been receiving messages from inside Zelthoran space. There are resistance movements even on their conquered worlds near the core. They are asking for support. How many ships do we have ready for deployment? Jack asked. Kate checked her datapad. 73 combat-ready vessels, another 20 in repair or refit. That is not enough for a full assault on the core worlds, someone said. Jack smiled. It does not need to be just our ships. Contact the Kryn fleet. Contact the Talvari. Contact every species that has thrown off the Empire. Tell them it is time. Over the next 3 months, the largest military alliance in galactic history came together. Species that had never worked together before joined the cause. The Kryn brought their heavy assault ships. The Talvari contributed fast attack craft. The Dorvan provided support vessels and medical ships. Humans brought innovation and determination. Kate shared her technology freely, teaching other species how to combine their strengths with human tactics. Lisa trained mixed units, soldiers from different worlds learning to fight together. Henry coordinated the intelligence network. Spies and informants inside Zelthoran territory provided constant updates. The Empire knew an attack was coming, but they did not know when or where. The target was obvious. Zelthora Prime, the homeworld of the Empire, the heart of their civilization, protected by 3 defensive fleets and the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. It should have been impossible to attack. Every military strategist in the Alliance said so. The defenses were too strong, the risks too great. But Jack knew that impossible was just another word for difficult. The Free World's fleet gathered at a staging area near the frontier. Over 300 ships from a dozen different species, the largest fleet ever assembled against the Empire. Jack stood on the bridge of Terra Ascendant and felt the weight of responsibility. If they failed, the Alliance would break. The rebellions would be crushed one by one. Humanity and every species that had trusted them would face extinction. If they succeeded, they would end the Empire forever. All ships report ready, Danny said. Jack took a deep breath. Signal the fleet. We move in 5 minutes. The jump to Zelthoran space took 3 hours. When they emerged, alarms immediately began sounding. The Empire had been waiting. 3 defensive fleets moved to intercept exactly as intelligence had predicted. Massive dreadnoughts and carriers, ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. They outnumbered the Alliance fleet and had better weapons, but the Alliance had something the Zelthorans did not expect. They had learned from every battle, adapted to every challenge. They were not one species following one doctrine, but many species bringing different strengths and ideas. The battle began at extreme range. Zelthoran long-range weapons fired and Alliance ships scattered. The Kryn heavy ships moved forward, their thick armor absorbing hits that would destroy lighter vessels. Behind them, human and Talvari fighters launched, thousands of small craft filling space. Kate had planned the assault carefully. The Zelthoran defenses were strong, but they followed predictable patterns. She had spent months studying those patterns, finding the weaknesses. The fighters attacked in waves, hitting the same defensive sections repeatedly. Pulse weapons disabled shields for seconds at a time. Torpedoes slipped through the gaps. Slowly, methodically, the Alliance fleet wore down the defenses. The Zelthorans fought desperately. This was their home, their world. They threw everything they had into the battle. Ships that ran out of ammunition rammed Alliance vessels. Officers who knew they were defeated kept fighting anyway, but the Alliance kept coming. For every ship they lost, more took its place. The Dorvan medical ships rescued survivors from destroyed vessels, both Alliance and enemy. The Kryn heavy ships pushed forward, creating openings for smaller craft. Human commanders adapted tactics in real time, responding to threats the moment they appeared. 18 hours after the battle began, the first defensive fleet broke. The surviving ships retreated toward the planet, trying to regroup. The Alliance fleet pursued. The second defensive fleet lasted 12 hours. They had seen what happened to the first fleet and fought smarter, but it was not enough. The Alliance had momentum now, confidence built on months of victories. The third fleet made a final stand in orbit of Zelthora Prime itself. These were the Empire's best ships, commanded by their finest officers. They knew that if they failed, their civilization would fall. Jack coordinated the final assault from Terra Ascendant. Around him, officers from 6 different species worked together, sharing information and tactics. This was what the Empire had never understood. Different species working together were stronger than any single species alone. Target the orbital defense platforms, Jack ordered. Lisa, take your assault teams and prepare for boarding actions. The battle for Zelthora Prime lasted 3 days. The planet's surface shields held against bombardment, but the orbital defenses slowly fell. Alliance Marines, including human soldiers trained by Lisa, boarded Zelthoran command stations and fought through corridors. The final moment came when Kate, working from a captured defense platform, found a way to shut down the planetary shields. It was not destruction, not a weapon, just a careful manipulation of the control systems. The shields flickered and died. The Zelthoran government, seeing their defenses collapse, sent a surrender signal. The war was over. Jack stood on the surface of Zelthora Prime 3 days later. The planet was beautiful, with purple skies and silver cities. It was hard to believe this peaceful-looking world had been the center of an empire that caused so much suffering. The surrender ceremony took place in what had been the Imperial Palace. Representatives from every species in the Alliance attended. The Zelthoran leadership, what remained of it, signed documents that officially ended the Empire's rule. Jack spoke to the assembled crowd, but he kept it brief. He talked about freedom and cooperation, about building something better than what had come before. He promised that humanity would not become another empire, would not repeat the mistakes of the Zelthorans. The months that followed were difficult. Establishing a new government, helping worlds transition to independence, dealing with former imperial officials who wanted to keep their power. But slowly, order emerged from chaos. The Free Worlds Alliance became permanent. Each species governed itself, but they cooperated on defense and trade. They shared technology and knowledge. They built something that had never existed before, a true partnership between equals. Kate returned to teaching, accepting a position at the new Interspecies Academy of Sciences. She taught engineering to students from a dozen different worlds, sharing everything she had learned. The academy became famous across the galaxy, a place where different species learned from each other,